Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to start by asking you a question. Do you all agree with me when I say that forests are much more than the trees that we see? Yeah? Okay. Do you agree with me when I ask you that the forests are much more than the trees that we see on the field? Yeah? I see some heads doing this, I'll assume it's a yes. So I'm glad, and I hope you all do, because today I'm here to talk to you about birds and how they can be used to monitor forest restoration in Brazil. I know it's a little out there. We all are here studying forestry, but I hope that by the end of the presentation you understand why. Just as a quick background, this is a picture of the Atlantic forest. It used to be this huge extension of forest, very beautiful, high trees, high diameters, but, well, not anymore. All the last estimates are showing that it keeps decreasing in most regions. It's a biodiversity hotspot. Some estimates around 15–20% of the regional vegetation, which is very low. And we have a lot of different scenarios, different realities, and some parts of the coast where people could not reach these areas because they are mountainous areas. We have still a little bit of it preserved. But this is an exception. What you have most is a mosaic with different land uses, varying from around 20% of our vegetation, and some even more extreme places. Here, a region known for very degraded pastures, very poorly managed, and some areas with mainly sugarcane plantation, where you can barely see a tree. And sometimes this is the landscape we are working with, where we have a lot of challenges to work on for restoration. Isolate small fragments that sometimes don't have resilience, areas with high slope and signs of erosion, aggressive invasive grasses that you use for the planting of the pastures, disturbance by fire and cattle. So the big question that we have is it possible? Can we restore the tropical forests in terms of biodiversity and ecosystem functioning? Is the big question that us working with tropical forest restoration we want to answer. And basically, we start to asking this to ourselves because from the past, the managers, they were mainly worried about how to establish something that we resemble by far, a forest, because we have all this challenge. We just wanted the trees to survive. But then we look after a few years, we can see that this is not what we're looking for. This is not typical Atlantic forest that uses multi-layer, a lot of species, a lot of regeneration. And this is what you're looking for. So that's a lot of the big gap on how to go to this, from that to this. And this is why we started to monitor this forest using different indicators. We have a lot of different indicators. It depends on what you're looking for, what you want to know about the ecosystem, canopy openness, natural regeneration, forest inventory, and all of that to compare with reference ecosystems. And in this particular work, we decided to use the bird community. But why birds? Why to work with birds? Basically, when it comes to fauna, it's very hard to survey when we compare to trees and plants overall. But birds, they are a special group of animals that are relatively easy to detect when compared to other groups. And also, they are very sensitive to environmental changes, to disturbances. The community changes very fast. And also, they play very important ecological roles in the tropical ecosystems. And that's why we chose to work with birds. So what we did here we have the coastline in Brazil. We are working around this region in southeast Brazil. What we did was to make the survey of the bird community in two restoration areas with different ages. Up here in yellow, the area with 4 years of restoration, and here 12 years. And we compared these areas with native secondary forest patches that were right next to them to evaluate if the community of birds using this area was similar or not. And another challenge that this poses is that I'm talking about areas that passed through the process of bauxite mining, so it's an extra challenge. And what we found doing these surveys was that the richness of birds, when it comes to species, families, and also endemic and strict range distribution species, the number was always lower than in the native forests, which we should expect for sure because they are young forests. But the difference was not so big. And especially here in the area with 12 years, the difference was quite small. And even in the restoration areas, we could still find endemic species, which are usually very specialized in some type of habitat. And when you look into the similarity between these two communities, we could see that the similarity has a tendency of increasing over time. It was much higher in the area with 12 years of restoration. And when we look into this area, it's very clear for us because on this background, we have the aspect, an aerial view, and a view from inside the forest of how it is the structure today. And for 12 years, this is pretty similar from a natural forest. And in the area with 4 years, it's just very different. And then we checked the diet preference of these birds too, to understand the difference between the functional groups of birds in these areas. And we found too that the distribution within all these categories was also very similar. So the groups of birds that are performing the ecological processes within this forest is very similar in restoration area and native forests. And especially, what is very important for us working with tropical forest restoration, is some ecological processes that are fundamental for the ecosystem to advance. So these species that are frugivore species that are very important on the seed dispersion process, and also nectarivore species that are very important for pollination of these trees. And the proportion of species was pretty much the same as we have in the natural forests. And the proportion when it comes to preferred habitat was also very similar. We can still find some species that are typical of field and open areas because of the effect of the matrix in this environment. But most of the species are forest and semi-forest species. And the proportion of forest species was also very similar among all the areas we evaluated. What we get from the studies is that, yes, we can see some quantitative and qualitative differences between the two environments. But when it comes to the time of restoration, these results are very good. Because 4 years and 12 years, even for tropical forests that grow much faster, they're still baby forests. So it's a very good result. And good restoration practices can be effective to restore. Of course, this is just one piece of it, one piece of the biodiversity that we can find in these areas. So these results should be evaluated considering all the other aspects, maybe some other indicators that might be even more effective. This is more of a research level, which is a disadvantage of this method because you need a specialist and ornithologist to work with, and sometimes it's not so easy to find. But at least the programs, each time more, are focusing on working with more than just the trees, understand what behind that, all the ecosystem functioning. So this would be very interesting for the companies, organizations working with tropical forests to understand a little more, go a step further, to evaluate all these communities. Birds is just an example. And it's a useful indicator because in this case we could see that the restoration is advancing well, but we could also have had negative results, which would make us think about, do we need to do some intervention here? Is there some ecological filter why we're not finding these species? So we can promote some very important insights so we can, as managers, work in this forest and see what can be done. Thank you.